Hello and welcome to Squatchspot.com. I'm Darrin Smith, and I hope that all of you out there are doing okay and that you and your loved ones are well. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am an independent Sasquatch researcher who is conducting field research in an area along the California Sierra Nevada mountains, near where I had a sighting of one of these creatures a number of years ago while on a solo backpacking trip. And just last March, I had an up-close and personal encounter with at least 2 Sasquatch while conducting field research in a new area of interest, and I also obtained some very credible evidence to substantiate that encounter. Since my initial sighting and my subsequent investigation into this phenomenon, I am absolutely blown away by the fact that these creatures do exist and are roaming our forests, and I am on a personal quest to gather more evidence to substantiate their existence. Although I haven't posted a video in quite some time, I have been keeping rather busy in the field. Not only have I been monitoring the incident site from last March, I've also been conducting a thorough investigation of the surrounding area. As I mentioned before on previous videos, I believe the Sasquatch move up to higher elevations during the summer months, and in this general area I believe those elevations are above 8,000 feet. But before I head up into the higher elevations in the backcountry, I wanted to really give this area a thorough investigation around the incident site, because I do believe the Sasquatch are moving throughout the seasons. However, I'm not sure how far they're traveling. So I really wanted to do a thorough investigation here just to make sure that they're still not in the general vicinity. And I have moved my investigation up to much higher elevations. In fact, the incident site is at about 6,500 feet, and right now we're just shy of 7,000 feet, and we're moving up to a lake that's at about 7,800 feet. And conducting my investigation in this area, I'm focusing my efforts along the waterways because these animals are going to require an extraordinary amount of water, and that's the perfect place to start an investigation. So I've been really focusing my efforts along the rivers, the streams, and lakes in the area. And also I've been spending a lot of time in these marshy meadows because the ground is so well saturated, it makes a perfect medium for footprint tracks, and it's also an ideal location to observe wildlife. Let's take a look at the general area I'm investigating. While investigating roadside game trails, I discovered some interesting impressions, which I initially dismissed as inconclusive. After sharing the discovery in a previous YouTube video, I received a number of messages from you guys encouraging that these impressions were in fact Sasquatch tracks. Clearly, the impressions were not bear tracks. As I mentioned before, as a bear walks, it could happen that its rear paw lands on an impression of its front paw, thus creating what looks like an elongated footprint. However, this does not happen consistently along a trackway, and the impressions I discovered, though lacking in detail, were all consistent in size and shape, and were within acceptable parameters to be Sasquatch tracks. So I continued my investigation of the area, and on March 3rd, 2020, I decided to move my investigation a little higher up on the mountain, just where the snow line was, and this is where I encountered Sasquatch. I can hear them. I can hear them walking, and I can hear them making these whooping sounds. They're here. Okay. I'm heading into the woods where I heard the sounds. I could hear them. I could hear them on the parabolic. I could hear them walking. It was definitely bipedal walking. I could hear they were making like little whooping sounds and grunting sounds. And I absolutely believe the Sasquatch are here. And I'm absolutely terrified. But we gotta get up here. Though I continue to monitor the incident site, I have also been broadening my search to include much higher elevations, and as I've mentioned, I'm focusing my efforts along the lakes and rivers in the area. I continued my investigation of the shoreline around the lake, and although I found plenty of evidence of animal activity, I did not find any physical evidence to support that the Sasquatch are in the area. One thing I will point out about this lake, it sits nearly above the tree line, and the landscape surrounding the lake is relatively open, mostly consisting of exposed rock, and if the Sasquatch are intentionally trying to remain elusive, I don't think that they would care to venture out into the open to access this lake. Also, as I investigated the area, I did come across a number of day hikers, which is another reason I suspect the Sasquatch would avoid this area. Admiring the expansive landscape, it is clear there are other areas of interest worth investigating. So I'm going to swing the camera around so you can kind of see what I'm looking at, but when you're investigating these canyon riverways, you want to look for areas that have gradual slopes coming down off the forest. These rock faces that you see behind me here are a lot more treacherous to come down, so you definitely want to be looking for these gradual slopes that are coming out of the forest down to the water sources, because it's going to make it a lot easier for the animals to access that water. So I've mentioned this a couple of times on previous videos that right now in the California Sierra Nevada mountains, we have had an incredible amount of devastation caused by the infamous pine beetle. And unfortunately, this beetle has killed tens of millions of trees along the Sierra Nevadas. And as a result, the forest is an absolute debris field of fallen trees, which makes it incredibly difficult to traverse the forests in this area. So I really do think that the animals are going to be taking the path of least resistance, and they're going to be moving along the roadways and also trails that have been cleared of debris. So this is really strategic when out looking for Sasquatch, because for sure they're not going to want to have to move through all this, all these obstacles within the forest. So I do think they're going to take the path of least resistance. I think they are going to be moving along our roadways that have been cleared of this debris. And also, if you find areas where there's a lot of hiking trails that the Forest Service has also cleared out, these are also great places to be looking for tracks and any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch are using these roadways and trails to move through an area. So these past few weeks I have been monitoring the incident site from last March, and I have also been conducting a thorough investigation of the surrounding area, focusing my efforts along the lakes and rivers in the area to see if I can ascertain if the Sasquatch are still in the general vicinity. And I have also been monitoring the roadways, paying close attention to the game trails which cross these roads. Animals are generally creatures of habit, and they will often utilize the same trails when maneuvering through the forests, or when crossing roads and accessing water sources. And I believe the Sasquatch will also be utilizing these same game trails and access points, which makes them an ideal location to look for any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch are still in an area. So it is clear throughout my investigation of the area, there is plenty of water and plenty of food sources for the Sasquatch should they be in the area. And I did find a lot of physical evidence to support that there are plenty of animals in the area. I found a lot of evidence that there were bear in the area, deer, coyote, as well as smaller animals. However, I didn't find any sort of physical evidence that leads me to believe that there's Sasquatch in the area. And one thing I will point out, although Yosemite National Park has not been fully open for tourism yet, and we're pulling into the end of June, they have opened a lot of the primitive campsites in the surrounding area and also in the foothills. So there are a lot of people up in these areas. And as I mentioned before, in the early spring, the winter, early spring months, it was very difficult to get up into these locations because of the snow. They don't have snow removal on the roads leading into this area. So this whole area was pretty much shut down for the winter and early spring months. However, now that the roads are open, there's an absolute parade of vehicles coming up here, and there's absolutely an abundance of people in the forest. So if the Sasquatch didn't leave the area for lack of food or water, I think they've moved out of the area probably because of the presence of humans. So unfortunately at this point, to continue our investigation, I think it's going to require I look at putting together an extended backpacking trip into the much higher elevations in the backcountry where the Native Americans are telling me the Sasquatch will be residing through the summer months. Having conducted a thorough investigation of the area, I am pretty convinced that the Sasquatch have moved out of the vicinity, and I'm fairly confident where they may have headed, based on my investigation of the area and the information I have obtained from the local Native Americans. Clearly, it is time for us to move our investigation to a new location. However, I will continue to monitor the incident site. And I also have the task of heading into my camera project area to retrieve the data collected from last year. I'm also interested to see if any new rock stacks have appeared near my cameras. So there's a lot of work to be done in the weeks to come, and hopefully a lot of discoveries to be made. So again, I want to thank you guys for your continued support of my channel. Honestly, it is the encouragement that I'm getting from you guys that keeps me going, and I really do think that we are on the right track, and I am going to continue my efforts. So be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so that you will be notified when I upload future videos. And until next time, I'm Darrin Smith, and I'll see you here at Squatchspot.com.